Hello and welcome to the stream. Now, this is a stream that I've been wanting to do for quite a long time. I've really been looking forward to this, and I know most of you guys will enjoy this. So, the guy we have on today, his name is Apocrypha. You've probably heard the name before, um, and we'll get into that once we get him on here. But he is a former MGTOW, a former moderator for Turd Flinging Monkey, and he's a good friend of mine who knows a lot of things about a lot of things. So I promise you this one will be probably my most interesting interview to date. So without further ado, welcome Apoc. What's going on, man?
Hey, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. I can't complain too much.
Feeling a little red in the face from that intro.
I just tell it like it is, my man.
I appreciate it.
So, as is customary for my streams, tell us about what made you go red pill. Like, what was your experience? What happened that made you seek out the different red pill communities? And you're kind of, not MGTOW anymore, but you were. Give us a little background about that.
Well, no, I still consider myself MGTOW, but I think that a lot of the MGTOW out there wouldn't. But we can get into that later. They would say I was a former MGTOW. Red pill moment. Okay, so I would say that I've said this before. I think it's a good analogy. In my case, most of the red pill happened over a long period of time. And then after I got divorced and started dating, and then stopped dating, that's when it all kind of hit. And it was because I'm on the autism spectrum, and I didn't know that until I was in my 40s. So the shortest version I can make of the story is I have been coming to the red pill for most of my life. But I never really had words for it. I never really truly understood what was going on with it. But I always had some success with the ladies. And the problem was I didn't genuinely understand what was going on. I sort of knew. Like I knew what worked, but I didn't understand particularly why. Then when I finished with my dating spree for a number of years, I isolated. I stopped dating. I stopped trying to form relationships with new women, and I really went internal. And I think the first content I got that was MGTOW related was Thinking Ape, because I was Stardust,
Yeah.
And I've actually talked with him a number of times privately, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, you were interviewed on his show.
Yeah, he interviewed me, and I also, and I'm on a server with him and all that. He's an interesting guy. But I think he was the first one. Him and Barbarossa were the first ones that I got exposed to. And the way they stated things, the way they basically laid things out in those days, this was a number of years ago. This was something like 4 years ago now, something like that. The way they laid things out and the things they were pointing to in both philosophy and history and about human nature were things that I hadn't heard before. And the reason I hadn't heard them is because, well, of course, they're not the kind of things that are talked about in standard books about human nature or the human species, for the most part. So that was like the final shred of the red pill. They put it all together for me. And at that point in my life, I had been married. I was married for over a decade, and I'd probably been with, I don't know, like 50 or 60 women, something like that, and a number of serious relationships as well. So, it took a while. Let's just say it took a long time for me to understand this. But I got there, and so that's when I started talking with Turd Flinging Monkey. The way I got to be a moderator on his server was his original streams were sort of the dumpster fire streams. I don't know if you remember those.
Yes, I do.
And I showed up, and I talked, and I didn't sound like a moron. So, ultimately he extended the offer for me to come onto his Discord. I was one of the first people on his Discord, and then they said, "Hey, do you want to be a moderator?" And that's where it went from there. And I was a moderator. I guess I still technically could be a moderator on there if I wanted to be. If I wanted to go back into that,
yeah, it's an open invitation. As far as I know,
I just don't have the time. Yeah, I just don't have the time. I wouldn't feel right because I don't have the time or the ability to focus on it and do things. But I was on there as an active moderator for nearly 2 years, and it was during that time that I dug really deep and really, really looked at. I mean, I took the red pill seriously. Like, I didn't. To me, and I think, well, this is something we can talk about later about the pills and what they mean.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, but for me, the red pill was really, genuinely, literally what it represents, which is the willingness to look unflinchingly at the truth, process it, integrate it. In a Jungian sense, integrate your shadow and move on. No matter how painful or difficult or trying that it is, you integrate it, you move on. And you don't fool yourself about what you're seeing or what you're hearing or what you're understanding. And I did that over and over and over again for those years. And, ultimately ended up where I am now. I wouldn't say that, I was an enlightened soul, but I think I've pushed past a lot of different barriers that many men are having difficulty with. So, and I've tried to help a lot of guys. Like, I've had so many conversations with men, young men, old men, in between men. And I've tried to help them kind of see their blind spot, like other people helped me see mine. So, is that an adequate answer? I mean, please feel free to dig down some more. I could go into a lot more detail if you like.
Oh no, that's pretty adequate. Yeah, I mean, usually people are like, had a wife and she did this, that, the other thing, and then but.
Oh yeah, no, my wife didn't screw me over. I mean, yeah. I went broke after my divorce, but that wasn't strictly because of her. That was because of the financial crash in 2009.
Yeah, from you and I talking, I mean, you made it pretty clear you had a fairly clean break when it came to that. You got lucky you didn't have children and
no children, no alimony.
Right. You got away clean and
clean. Yeah.
It probably didn't wreck your confidence.
I wouldn't say that. I was raised well. I mean, and not for any real reason, but I was raised Catholic. I'm not Catholic, but I was raised Catholic, and they really dig that guilt and shame into you when you're young. I'll tell you. A friend of mine said Catholic and Jews have shame and guilt in common. That's why they can get along. But I would say I felt guilty and like I was a failure after that for a while. And it was I mean, you can understand why. I mean, I had literally spent myself trying to make that thing work, and I didn't have a full picture as to why it wasn't. And to what was actually going on. So, although I managed to keep it going for over a decade, which isn't too bad, And my wife, by the way, I met her when she was 19. My ex-wife. So we started dating when she was 19.
And how old were you at the time?
29.
10-year difference. Okay, not
Yep.
too shabby.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of guys who are your age would probably be little jealous about the gal you're dating now.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, I'm just talking about at your age, being able to pull someone like that. They'd probably be a little jelly.
Yeah, well,
Some
she's
actually.
She's how much younger than me is she? 14 years younger than me, or no, 16 years younger than me. Yeah, 16 years. Yeah. Yeah, my current paramour is 16 years my junior.
Okay.
And I briefly dated a 20-year-old 2 years ago. So for about 4 months.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to pass up a 6-foot-tall Swedish girl.
And speaking of jealousy, man, we got to get a little bit into what's happened in the past year or two.
Oh yeah, sure.
With our mutual acquaintance. In case any of you guys who are watching aren't familiar with this person, this is the guy that helped kick off everything as far as finding out what kind of person DDJ, Blobby Lewis, Misandry Today, whatever you want to call him, who he really is.
Yeah.
All right, this is the guy right here. So I'll let you, we're not going to cover this too much, but I'll let you talk about that briefly, summarize it for us.
Well, it's a real shame that all happened because you know, if he had been 25% of what he had represented himself as, he could have done a lot of good for the community. I got involved with Bobby, with DDJ. I was working with him on his Discord server and as a moderator for his Twitch stream and all the other things, because he was the way he was approaching. I mean, he had a certain approach which sounded like it was workable. What I did not know was that it was all an act. He was very, very talented in terms of verbal manipulation and compartmentalization. So basically, and there was a bunch of, the specific details aren't really too important, but there was a whole bunch of things that happened in terms of in the real world, in terms of me extending resources to him and to someone else who was involved with that group. And then I was leaving. I was living in California at the time, and I was intending on leaving. So I was setting all of that up, and I was going to go to where he was set up to see what was there, and to see if he was serious, and to see what was going on. And I wanted to understand. You don't really know until you're physically there.
Right, of course.
So I was going to, because he wanted to build an intentional community, and I was like, oh, well, that sounds pretty cool. And my intention was to drive cross country and in my RV and just hang out here and hang out there until I found a place to settle again, because I was done with California. I've been working in telecommunications. I've been working in telecommunications for since '95. So I was kind of burnt out, and the whole California scene was getting too toxic for me to deal with. So it seemed like a reasonable offer. I could go there, park my RV, hang out there for a while for free, and evaluate the situation. Well, yeah.
He certainly wasn't who he said he was he?
No, not at all. And I figured it out within the first 48 hours, which I'm sure he didn't anticipate. But I have a martial arts background, and he proclaimed to be a martial artist, and he made the mistake of putting up a heavy bag, a water ballasted heavy bag. You know those?
Yes.
And he was punching and kicking it. And he was making mistakes that when I was training people, I would correct within the first, we're talking about white, yellow belt type mistakes. I mean, he obviously had hit things before, but he didn't know, he had never been trained, that I could tell. He may have read books and done a lot of street fighting, but he didn't know anything about martial arts. And I was surprised. I was like, I didn't say anything. I just thought, well, okay, maybe it's just one of those situations where the guy is, not being entirely truthful about something because he feels weird about it or whatever. I wasn't sure, but I was watching after that. But that moment when I saw that he had no technique, was what keyed me to watch him very closely and to listen to him very closely. And within the next 36 hours, this is the day after I got there, by the way. Within the next 36 hours, I was like, oh man, this guy is a con man. Nothing he says is true. I should say, I wouldn't be surprised if nothing he says is true, or very, very little. But I kept my powder dry because I could be wrong. That's the kind of person I am. I don't like causing unnecessary drama. So I let it alone. Some other stuff happened. I didn't confront him. I didn't confront anybody. And I just kept watching and listening. And he just kept building up the same stuff. And I was like, man, this guy. So I finally brought up the subject to our mutual acquaintance. And this mutual acquaintance confirmed that he had lied to her. He had lied to.
Oh, they all know. Everybody who's watched my stuff knows it is a her.
Okay,
they know what her.
He had lied to. He had lied to her about what I said about her, and then she asked me a question, and I told her the answer, and she realized he had lied to her about something that he said to her. I had said about her. So he was practicing classic divide and conquer compartmentalization. And once we started comparing notes, it was all over. Once she and I started comparing notes, because she's on the spectrum too, so we started using fast talk shorthand, and it was game over. We just ended up talking for the whole day. We went on a drive, but we were talking about all sorts of things the whole time, and it was done. It was like, oh. So, and that was about 9 days after I got there that happened. So, and then a bunch of other, I don't want to get into anything private about the business.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But there was a business deal that was going on as well. And he asked me to do something that was ridiculous, that I would only do for someone who was like literally related to me, like someone who I had known their whole life. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. It's too risky. And he was shocked that I wouldn't do it because it wouldn't have cost me money, but it was still risky. And it just went down from there. That was the last civil conversation I had with him. And then after that is when he went off the rails. He realized that the jig was up, and then after that, he burnt everything down, scorched the earth. He started making all sorts of weird claims about me, including that the fact that I had lots of coffee with lots of sugar and that I smoked meant that I was a meth addict, which I thought was hilarious. But yeah,
still a running joke.
Yeah. So he basically burnt. This is classic. And then after, she and I realized that he was probably, he might be schizoaffective. He was certainly with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder tendencies. And so that sewed it all up. But then he started acting like a complete asshat, and I started thinking things that I shouldn't be thinking. So I told my host that I have to leave before I do something I'm going to regret. And so I left. I was there for a total of about 3 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
About 3 weeks total. And that's how long it took for the whole thing.
Yeah.
That was messed up. It was, yeah, that was not good. And I had just recently dealt with another friend who had gone off the rails.
Hmm.
And had a psychotic break, which I wasn't expecting. So that's 2 in a row, that hit me
Right.
within 3 months. And then I had some stuff that happened around my Burning Man camp that wasn't good. So I just kept getting hit on the head, But yeah, as far as the DGJ stuff goes, that's the 10,000-foot view.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's the gist of it. I mean, you could get into more details, but it's not really necessary. Let's.
I'm trying to. Yeah, I'm just trying to protect because I don't want to.
Yeah. Oh, I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to the present. Now, your life is vastly different.
Yes.
Some people would say you're not a MGTOW because you were cohabitating with a woman.
Yes.
That's you're breaking one of the tenets. Now, I know you say in your own way that you are a MGTOW, but how is your life now? Like, what brought about the change to sort of go from classic MGTOW to where you're at currently?
It's a really good question. Well, I mean, the short version is I tripped over a woman who was shaped vaguely like a unicorn. And I mean, when I called her to tell her what was going on with me during all this DDJ stuff, we talked a whole bunch. And I mean, I had been with her. We actually originally thought this was just going to be a fun thing. We were going to be dating lightly, and then that would be that. But I called her in the middle of all the hubbub, and I said, I got to get out of here, but I don't have anywhere to go, and I don't want to just go anywhere. Do you mind if I come back to where you are for a little while and just to get my head straight? And she said, no, that's great, and then she offered to fly out to where I was and ride all the way back with me, which was pretty amazing. I didn't ask her to. And on the way back, I learned a lot more about her. And, I at some point I said to myself, this person is definitely unicorn shaped. Although there are obviously problems, but there's never not going to be problems. So what do you have to lose, really? Because it's not like I have, it's not as if, I'm responsible for everything. It's not as if I put myself in a position to we'll move into my house and we'll do, you know what I mean? It's not like that. It's not a lot of liability. I'm not actually being subjected to a lot of liability at the moment. But that's actually part of the whole deal. And she's just a very interesting person. Now, and like I said, vaguely unicorn shaped. She's compassionate and actually genuinely cares about my well-being, which is pretty amazing. It's actually the first time, and I watched. I know what to look for, and it's not like she doesn't have female nature, but she definitely seems to have moderated it. And then I found out that she was her icon in life was her grandmother, who recently passed at the age of 102. And she's a Jeffersonian, which means she knows everything there is to know about Thomas Jefferson and the founding of the country. So she is studied biology and psychology, and she's just an all-around really fascinating person with a good heart. And I just decided to, for a lot of reasons, which we'll get into in a minute, I decided I was going to give it a shot. That's a risk. I know it's a risk. But I'm taking it with my eyes open.
Okay, so you found a girl that you're willing to take a risk. But what about philosophically? I think that's more what I was kind of getting at. But
Okay.
I know you have a
disagreement
in some of the philosophy. You have philosophical disagreements with TFM, for instance. But let's get into that.
Okay. Well, let's see. I have trouble. What I have trouble with, as far as how TFM projects his conclusions, is that there are some assumptions he makes about outcomes that I don't think anyone can know. So, if this happens, then that will happen. In other words, the notion that, because we're living through a time in history. Okay, let me back up a little bit. Historicity is currently not a reliable guide to the future. Unless society degrades back down to medieval level, what we have now is a network of communication and transportation that we've never had before, ever. Nothing even close. To call it a second Gutenberg revolution would, be like comparing a drop of rain to the ocean. The profound effect of all of this, I think, is only just starting to flower. And I don't think most people, including myself, don't really understand how it's going to spiral out. We're literally, Elon Musk, and it's an interesting analogy he used. He said, with the internet, the human species is developing a new nervous system. And who the hell knows what outcomes are going to happen as a result of that? We don't know. So to make sweeping proclamations and generalizations about outcomes in terms of predicting them based on history, and I've said this many times in chat, be very careful about this, because there's never been a time like this before. There are similarities because we're all still people, right? But are you sure you're identifying the parts of this that are human nature properly? And that's where I think the model starts to fall. The whole notion of defining female nature and talking about it in the open is the new information that most men don't have. I imagine it used to be talked about in smoky back rooms, but now it's open, and now we have all this detail. It's still being pushed back against, obviously, but it doesn't matter. It's out there now. You're not putting the genie back in the bottle. So we understand these concepts: hypergamy, social status, female hierarchies, how they, all the things that they do or they want to do, how they function, how they operate in the world. We've talked about endlessly. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is with the conclusions as to what action should or shouldn't be taken. And I don't think we're in another cycle where you have the same, because there's never, like, with weapons of mass destruction, there's never going to be a major war. Again, if there is, we're done. Right? If there's a major war with with two nuclear powers, it's over. So if it happens, none of this matters. So we may as well assume it's not going to happen. And that being true is a complete break from history, because history has been defined by war after war. In fact, most people break history down into the various periods of war and the various wars that have happened throughout history. So That's completely different. How we relate to each other is completely different. And, computers, telecommunications, and as an outgrowth of that, the platforms that live on those things, social media, what we're doing right now. I mean, I'm halfway across the country from you and we're talking live. It's amazing. It's like magic. All of these things are having such a profound effect on the human psyche that I think that we have to dig a little deeper to really understand what's going on. And so that's where I disagree. I don't think that the typical strong men, weak men, strong men create good times create weak men create hard times create strong men. I don't think that cycle is quite the same as it used to be, because it's not that hard. Like, when we look at what's happened as a result of all of these things, the thing that men are missing, I think, is something to hook their star to. With the decline of the family, with the lack of respect for men in general, and with the decline of religion, what do men have to hook their star to? And that's the real problem. Everybody always says, oh, create your own meaning. Yeah, I'm sorry. But even Nietzsche thought that only the Ubermensch could do that. And I'm sorry, but we're not that. So you have to find it. You have to discover it. You can't create it. And if it's not there in your culture, where is it? So you have all these people searching. That's the real problem. That's the tragedy, is this destruction of meaning in people's lives, I think, is the real tragedy. I mean, all the other things are bad too. I mean, because so many people sacrifice so much to get us to where we are now, they'd barely recognize the world as it is now. And that's bad. But the worst thing is that people look at all of this and say, what's the point of doing anything? And they become bitter, and they start to come to conclusions that aren't necessarily warranted. So that's where I part ways with TFM, is with some of the conclusions he comes to. I also have some fundamental philosophical disagreements with him about drugs, because I'm a libertarian, so I don't think they should be illegal. Prostitution, same thing. All of that. So I have some basic disagreements with him about those things. He says it's fine, do whatever you want, just don't force me to pay for it. But in reality, he doesn't like them and thinks they're stupid. I don't think I know enough to know whether or not they're stupid. So that's sort of the area of disagreement I have with TFM and with the MGTOW community in general. I don't think I know enough to really, like, I thought I knew, and then I realized I didn't.
You got to keep in mind some of the stuff he talks about is his own personal thing, and it's not necessarily reflective of MGTOW and the MGTOW philosophy.
That's true.
Just like to take women's rights away is not
MGTOW. Right. Yeah, I know.
TFM's flavor.
Yeah.
I've had Grizzly on here. My boy Grizzly was on here, and I asked him, what are the tenets of MGTOW, and he explained them to me.
Yeah, usually what people say is no cohabitation, no marriage, no kids.
Yep. And be your own mental point of origin.
Right.
So
as best you can.
The four,
Yeah.
So.
Well, in my case, I found that I spent a number of years trying, and maybe it's just that I'm too old to change. I don't know. I really don't know. But at the end of the day, I realized that if I didn't have someone in my life to keep me accountable to myself, something to be someone and some structure to be responsible for, and two, that I was gonna fall off the edge of the world, and I was just gonna, hermitize and have a cabin in the woods, and nobody would ever hear from me again. And I decided I didn't want that. I wanted something a little bit more vibrant than that. So that was another reason why I decided to live with my current girlfriend.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
And I realized that it's, against the quote unquote tenets. But
yeah, for the most part, you're hitting all of them, but one really just the cohabitation part, as far as I can see.
Yeah, it's just that.
That's
that.
Whatever. I mean, I'm a red pill dude, and I'm fine with it. I'm not a MGTOW. I never, I've always been a do your own thing kind of guy instead of like, let's join this group. No, I am, that's where I get the lone wolf moniker, because I don't really like doing that. I like being my own man. It's not that I can't work with a group, but I don't want to be like, we are, I just don't get into that. I don't need that to create my identity, that being in this group or that group.
Well, do you not think that the name Men Going Their Own Way, don't you think it, if you're going your own way, it always bothered me, by the way, that to be a man going your own way, you had to follow rules. That always seemed silly.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, but I think the whole point was going their own way from women, and not like in the broader sense that perhaps some people might look at it.
Sure, but well, okay, so this is a good opportunity to talk about context. Like, essentially, when we talk about all of this, we're talking about being controlled by circumstance, right? And we're talking about putting yourself in a situation where you're at a disadvantage, both practically, spiritually, emotionally, and so on. That's why people say, don't cohabitate, right? So you always have your own space, and etc. Creates pragmatic space, right?
And it can give her leverage by her living with you. That's another reason for it.
Right. The whole, give her an inch, she'll take a mile.
Yeah.
But I think that it truly depends on the nature. It definitely depends on the nature of the person you're talking about. Yeah, in all situations it does. If you, look at the story I told about Bobby. He wasn't a woman; he was a man, and he caused me more hassle. He caused me more hassle than any including my ex-wife, ever caused me.
That's bad, dude.
Right? So you see what I'm saying? So it's like I don't understand how. I understand from a legal standpoint, and the kids and the child support, and the alimony, all that stuff. I understand. Believe me, it's all there. I understand it. But as far as real world, if you don't have kids and you don't get married, yeah, there's still the whole common law thing and so on, but that's hard to enforce. And generally speaking, unless you're rich, and if I was rich, it'd be a different story, right? But if you were rich, then you'd have a different set of options. But unless you're rich, what's going to happen to you? I'm sure there are stories of men who've had their assholes, wallets ripped out through their asshole, who weren't rich and didn't get married and didn't have kids. But it's going to be hard for a court to, even a family court, to insist, especially to insist on something like alimony, if you are consistently encouraging the woman you're living with to go work and do her thing. So I think it all comes down to context. It's it's not as if it's going to be easy for a family court to screw you over if you didn't actually get married and you didn't have kids with a woman and all you did was live together and you always split the bills, or you paid for some things and you always encouraged her to work if she was working. It's going to be hard, but it's a far. So if you think about that as a scale of risk, that's what I thought about. On the scale of risk, this is the best risk. This is the least amount of risk versus the return that I can imagine for this situation. If you want to think about it like that, I don't think about it like that exclusively, but that's one way to look at it. So in the situation I'm currently in, this is a very low risk scenario comparatively.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, that's another thing. I don't like when motherfuckers try to dick police me. Like, they never really try. They've never really tried. And I will say I'm not a MGTOW, but I see that some of these guys, they're almost like, it's almost religious, where they see other guys who say that they're MGTOW, and if they do something that they think isn't MGTOW, but they make video after video after video about it.
Yeah.
And try to put them into, into submission.
I mean, I got called all kinds of names by DDJ afterwards, and
oh yeah,
I don't really care.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a little aside. I wanted to get into this for just a second, but the conversation was flowing. But I don't know if you've looked into the Vox Day socio-sexual hierarchy and looked into the gamma male and other things people have written about it.
I've only lightly looked at it. So,
oh my God, I'll have to show you later on. Krauser PUA, way back, it was like 2014 or 2015, wrote something that it describes him basically to a T, really.
Interesting.
So I'll get that to you later. But in essence, it's feminized thinking and the secret king delusion.
Yes.
And,
that.
Yeah, and an acquaintance of ours made the mistake of telling him about this, and of course he got on Twitter and started trying to imply that you're a secret king.
I'm the opposite of that. I'm the opposite of that. I'm always telling people I don't know anything and I can't do anything.
Well, you know how he likes to project. But anyways, I just thought that was funny, because the feminized, feminine behavior thing, and you were talking about how he caused you more trouble than any woman that you had. And
by far.
Yeah, near a woman,
Yeah, by far. I mean, the worst I had it with my ex-wife was just, figuring out how to divide everything, but she didn't make that terribly difficult. I mean, it wasn't like she was ranting about anything. It wasn't like, I never had that reaction from, so I've never had an ex who came after me or freaked out afterwards, because I always put energy into the breakup period to make sure it was diffused properly. I never just ghosted somebody. I always looked them straight in the eye and broke up with them every time. And consoled them, and and so on. And I never ghosted anyone, and I've never been stalked as a result. I've had some of them call me back. I've had XX and all that. Being it's pretty common to be a booty call for your ex. So, but other than that, I've never had those kinds of problems with exes. I mean, I've had them shit talk me, right? But who cares?
Yeah,
like that's
we all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my friends knew me well enough to know I was being shit talked anyway. So, and because I put so much energy into the breakup and made sure to cushion it, usually it took a couple of weeks for the breakup to be finished. Of me talking and cushioning and doing all the things. So because I cared, this is the thing, I actually cared about it, right? I actually cared about their feelings, and I wanted to make sure that they were okay, at least, that it was a short, sharp shock, but that it was something they could handle, that it wasn't like, I wasn't just saying you're a piece of shit. Go away, because that's only going to make them want you more and make them go off the reservation. And so maybe it's just my style, I don't know. But I never had that kind of problem with an ex. Not once. So the situation with GTJ was just like breaking up with an ex, only on steroids and with a crazy Latina ex.
Oh, don't make me get into that. My younger brother's getting a divorce, and
oh right, I'm sorry, I forgot.
He finally told me his Latina fever is over. He's finally thank God.
Yeah, I went through a brief period like that in my 20s and learned my lesson quick.
Yeah, I just learned, and that one I've only been with white girls, so I let other people make the mistakes, and I learned from other people's mistakes. So okay, so your current lifestyle, you have the grill, the house, the picket fence, and the chickens and the chicken coop.
Yeah, I built a chicken coop. It's not completely finished yet, but it's structurally done. Yeah, I think I sent you photos of it. And it's cool. The chickens are chilling inside. I still have to build the chicken run, but that's going to be taken care of in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, pretty cool. Chicken coop garden. I have a nice. We're building a garden, and doing landscaping and all the things. It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. I was just saying, you're living the good life. You're not like a technical MGTOW, and you're a lot happier in recent times than, like, say, 2 years ago when I was talking to you. You were kind of going through a depression. So, your life is much better. Would you say, in your opinion? Much better.
I would say it is. Yeah, I'd say very much so. Well, I mean, mainly because of the fact that Kristen is. Oh God damn! I just said her name. Well, anyway, she's a stellar person, and doesn't have an evil bone in her body, and also because being in the situation gave me the space I needed to finally finish, processing all the nonsense that I'd been trying to process for years. Because, when you're like, you don't really know a thing until you don't really know a thing that has to do with human experience unless you go through it. You may think but you don't really. Not until you go through it. I'm in my mid-50s at this point, and I can say that authoritatively. I understand why now that my dad used to shake his head at me, because you don't really understand things until you do them or until you feel them. And when it's something as complex and difficult as relationships with another human being, in a complex and difficult world, it can take so many attempts. And I actually kind of envy younger guys right now because they have so much more information than I ever had. Because that's really what got me over the final hurdle, was having access to this information and to be able to talk to other men freely about these things, which I had never really had the opportunity to do before, because I was always being given, it's, how it is. Most guys don't think about this stuff, and if they do, they get uncomfortable. don't really want to talk about it. Like, it's generally just reduced to, women are bitches and hoes, oh my. That's generally what the talk is behind the scenes with guys. But these guys elevated it to a new level. They were talking about things with actual dictionary words rather than slang, and they were referencing real philosophers, and real scientists and real paleontology and real evolutionary biology. And so that's what got me. That's what intrigued me. That's what brought me on board, and what caused me to finally learn the pieces that got me over the hurdle. So.
Okay, so I think we're going to skip one thing that we had talked about discussing and probably do like a part two. And that's the I'm just going to tell you what it is before we segue to the next thing I want to talk about.
Okay.
Welcome, plumber. Welcome.
Hey, man.
So we're gonna save the evolutionary thing about you talking about monogamy, humans not being really made for monogamy originally. We're going to talk about that another time.
Okay.
I know that Rolo's talked about that on some of his streams.
Yeah, that's a giant can of worms.
Yes, it's too big. So what I would like to segue to is the black pill. Now, I wouldn't call myself a conventionally attractive man, but women are interested in me, and you're not the same. You're not conventionally attractive according to what these black pill guys would say, but yet you can pull it down. That's why you got the nickname Apocrypha from me.
Yeah.
So, because I know you can pull. I mean, hell, the girl you're with is almost 20 years younger than you.
That's true.
And for those who might wonder, I have met her a couple of times. She's not a bad looking gal. So he's doing really well. And I know a lot of guys who are his age who would be jealous of his ability to pull it down. But the point being is, like, neither of us are conventionally attractive. We don't look like, Thor from the Marvel movies.
No.
But we can generate female interest.
Sure.
Right. But these black pill guys, and I just kind of want to get your opinion. I'm not going to say their information is not wrong. Like, we all know that women are more attractive to, tall, muscular, square jaw, masculine. But these guys are being told that if they're not 6 foot and they don't have the Chad jawline, that it's all over for them. No woman will ever touch their PP. I mean, they're not saying this, but they're practically telling people to off themselves. So, we can get into more details, but I kind of want to get your opinion or what you think about that.
Well, I said to you earlier that I think that for the most part, the black pill is actually just a really dark blue pill. Because they're still validating themselves in terms of women.
Yeah.
And of course people are going to say, how are you saying that? You're living with a woman. Aren't you doing that? No. Do you validate yourself in terms of your relationships? I mean, to some extent, but it's not the same thing. What I mean is the definitions that they're being defined as you're never going to get a pretty girl, so why bother participating at all? First of all, it's nonsense. As you just said, I'm not exactly a conventionally attractive guy, but I've never had trouble with the ladies. It's never been like, they jump into my lap, although sometimes that's happened. Yeah. But for the most part, I've always had to do some work. And but I've never had any real trouble getting interest. And what I'm not saying is that, I'm not saying that if it's easy for me, it's going to be easy for you. Like, first of all, it's not easy. It's never been easy for me. Like I said in the beginning of this conversation, I'm on the spectrum, and all of this has been, and to some extent still is, a total mystery to me. I'm functioning on a second order interpretation. My social instincts suck. So everything I'm doing right now to be social is actually constructed over many years of careful effort and practice. So it wasn't easy for me. But I realized, looking back on my life, that the reason that it was never really a big problem for me was because once I realized I had to stop being thirsty, then all of a sudden it was easy for me to date. Now, that happened to me around age 23. Right around age 23, I figured that out. Like, I got to stop being thirsty. I was, I think it was when I was looking at a Chinese finger puzzle. That image sticks out of my mind when I think about this. Because if you think about it, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the harder you try, the harder it is to get out of the trap. You have to go the opposite way in order to get out. So I thought, well, I'll try that. I'll go the opposite way. I'll just stop being thirsty, and I'll just enjoy their company like people. And then if they show interest, I'll show interest, and we'll see what happens. That's literally the thought process I had. That's what I did. And it worked 50% of the time, which is amazing if you think about it. I never read PUA books. I never studied game. I was naive as all hell when it came to women. But I didn't have, after that, one realization, things became much easier. And then over time, even easier. And I like to call it my women are people moment.
I mean, we had a saying in the Army about guys who had higher rank than you, like they put their pants on one leg at a time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that you wouldn't be all nervous and fumbly. I mean, you can apply something similar to women. Women, she's a human being, right? But I think with a lot of these guys, because you haven't seen any of the streams or anything, but a lot of these guys are like, well, I studied game and I hit the gym and I did this. But when they were asked, like, well, who did you learn game from? It's like really old. They replied with really old stuff like Mystery Method and RSD and stuff like that. Now, they will point out that they understand a woman's body language, right? And this is something that I don't think I necessarily said to you, I only implied it earlier today, but a lot of guys don't realize it's not just her body language. It's your body language too. So if you're low confidence, your body language is going to show that, right? So if you're over there like slumped shoulders and you won't look her in the eye, but you're looking down, or there's all kinds of things that dude could be doing, and women can sniff that shit out.
Oh yeah,
real easy. Like they're designed to do that. So
yeah, the thing about it is you genuinely have to. You can't fake it. I mean, you can if you're really good, but it's like being an actor. But you have to be a really good actor, and most people aren't really good actors.
They will sniff you out. That's what a lot of your problem is, your confidence. Like they went on cam, like during some of these streams, they cammed up. They weren't bad looking guys at all. Their problem is probably their confidence and their body language, and just probably being socially awkward. And I mean, if a guy who is like on the spectrum, like you can figure this stuff out, so can they.
Well, and that's the point I'm trying to make. The thing I figured out was none of that. The thing I figured out was that if I treated a woman like a person, she would respond like a person.
But that's a part of thirst, though, right?
Right. You have to let that go. Like you have to let it go. Yeah.
Right. You have to
Let
get
it go.
rid of that first and talk to her
Yeah.
like she's a human being.
Correct.
You may want to sleep with that human being, but
Right.
she's still a human being. Right?
But that has to be the second, like that can't be, like you have to genuinely be interested in her as a person.
Yeah, that's my thing. I have to like
No,
her. I'm not going to fuck
yeah,
her if I don't like her. Unless I
yeah.
want to grudge fuck her. But, another story.
Look, look, there are exceptions to every rule. I've certainly engaged in what would you call it? Lothario behavior. And I've done that. So, but most of the women I've been with have been attracted to me not because of that, but because I was paying attention to what they were saying. I was responding to what they were saying in context of their discussion with me. And so they knew that I was actually interested in in them. And so, and it doesn't always work. I mean, if they're not interested in you, they're not interested in you, right? And you got to let that go too. You can't chase. Like, that's the thing. Don't chase. Just be interested. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Move on.
Right. And that's another thing that confidence is the main issue with these guys. Excuse me. Is that if they get rejected, it's like the end of the fucking world for them.
That's the advantage, though. See, if you go into the situation saying, I just want to know this person, I want to get to know this person, and it doesn't end up being sexual, you still got, generally, women are pretty polite if you're actually paying attention, unless they're complete assholes, in which case, why would you want to deal with a woman like that anyway? But if they're willing to talk to you at all as a person, and you actually talk to them, even if nothing sexual happens, you've still gotten something out of it. And one of the things you can get out of it, if you want to reduce this to some kind of equation, is social proof. So that woman is now going to speak well of you to other women, for the most part, because you paid attention to her. You didn't act creepy. You were just treating her like a person. And so now there's a good chance she'll speak well of you to other women and other people. And if you genuinely associate with her from time to time, like a person, that'll build over time. Your network will build, and eventually you'll hit the jackpot. It's like you can't. It's not about an equation. It's about having genuine interest in the other person. Genuine. Can't be faked. You got to actually be interested. And if you can't do that, if you can't actually be interested in what a woman has to say, then I don't know what to tell you.
Well, it also helps with having something to talk about or the conversation. Because if you don't have genuine interest, you're not going to be too interested in the conversation. She's going to pick up on that.
That's a good point.
Things like that.
That's a really good point. And so usually what I would do is I would just keep asking her questions about herself and her life until she said something that related to an interest of mine. And then I would say, oh, and then boom, and I would dig in on that. So I would just ask a lot of questions to get to know who this person was. So I was interested in getting to know who this person was in case they had some common interest of mine. And if they did, then I would burrow in on that. So, but it wasn't, the thing is, I'm talking about this as if I was doing this sort of consciously. But it wasn't, it was half conscious. Because I really am interested in other people. I really do like talking to other people, women and men. And when people say women don't have anything useful to say, that's another thing I don't like about much of that's one of the other attitudes I don't like. It's like, yeah, no. Women do have useful things to say. It's just that you have to put them, you have to understand, you have to understand they're coming at things from a different point of view than you are. So.
Yeah, sometimes. My thing is like, I just don't try to make women something they're not. I accept women for who and what they are.
Sure.
They're not here to save me or to be another mother or,
Mhm.
you know, anything like that. They're just people. I may want to bang them, but they're people at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but again, that's the beauty of establishing a real relationship with a person. Because if you do that, then the other stuff, if you need emotional support, it tends to be there. I mean, when people talked about always being rejected, see, okay, here's something that I never really discussed much with MGTOW guys, because I found out that most of them hadn't had this experience, and it was something I never really understood. And maybe we can explore it. I don't know,
Sure.
but I've certainly, well, I most of the time, my experience with my exes and my current girlfriend is they. My experience is that they are interested in emotionally supporting you, but that's my experience.
Yeah.
And my experience. Pardon me?
I said everyone has a different experience, though.
Right.
Maybe these guys. Sorry to cut you off, but maybe these guys don't realize that maybe they fucking smell. Maybe they, didn't brush their teeth very well or floss. It could be a number of things. But every time they get rejected, it's just like, oh, she hates me. She wants me to die. She wishes I hear it. Like they immediately internalize that.
Mm-hmm. Look, I know what it's like. I remember when I was a teenager and when I was younger, and I remember very acutely how it felt to, just totally be obsessed with one particular woman. And it's very hard. I mean, you probably remember too. It's really powerful.
Yeah, I've had one-itis before. I've talked about that briefly on one of my streams, and yes, it is very powerful. Them chemicals that you release, I mean, it's hard, and when things ended, I was in a deep depression for a while. It took me a while to come out of it, and of course, I found the red pill later, and I realized all of my mistakes and everything, and I just couldn't be better now. Like I love life now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's ironic that the best times I've had have been later in life. So, but I mean, that's because I never got taught any of this stuff, and that's of course something we talk about too, which is that the previous generation didn't teach us how to be men, or they didn't know how to be men. They were just hopelessly blue pill, and we're just following the program.
Yeah, but I don't know if the audience will quite understand that, so I'll just talk briefly about that. And I think we're going to open the floor up for questions, guys, here in a second. But
sure,
what he means when he says that previous generations didn't teach us is like my parents are fucking boomers, right? So that's strike one. And I had a great dad, don't get me wrong, but he also didn't want to teach me stuff. He didn't want to mentor me to do stuff. I had to learn, everything on my own. My parents were fairly hands off aside from disciplinary things. If I did something wrong, of course, I got my ass whooped. But I wasn't taught. I didn't learn how to work on my car from my dad. I learned how to do that on my own, which, again, that comes back to my moniker, the Lone Wolf moniker. That's how I was brought up. And Apoc here has had kind of not exactly the same situation, but something similar.
Well, my parents weren't boomers. They were both born in the 20s, and they adopted me when they were 40 and 42, respectively. So I got a very old school set of parents, basically, compared to most people. Old school Catholic. So in my case, I would say it was similar. There was a lot of rules, a lot of boundaries, and they basically didn't pay attention to me. You know, my childhood during the summer was, go out and play, come back when I call you for lunch. That was pretty much my whole summer.
That was kind of how my childhood was. I went out in the woods, and came home at night for dinner and all that stuff. And
Yep.
Parents were very hands off. That being said, they stayed together. My grandparents stayed together. I had a pretty good life compared to the way I've heard some other people talk. So I'm not going to complain about it. My parents weren't perfect, and nobody's perfect.
No.
Oh.
No, my parents stayed together too, and they went the long haul. They were married for almost 50 years when my father passed. So, I mean, there were a lot of good things, but the sum total of the advice about women that I got from my father was, make sure you wrap it twice if you've never seen her before.
Yeah, well, that is good advice, but that's all you're getting. I mean, I did get stuff like from my father that like the man should be the head of the household, that sort of thing. So even when I would probably say I was more purple pill growing up than blue pill, but I always hated feminism. Even before I discovered the red pill, I detested it. Go ahead.
I didn't, but I was, as I said, I was. It took me a long time to, just because of the fact that I didn't have any social instincts, and I had to develop everything cognitively and through experimentation. So it just took me a really long time, and I was always functioning on a level of what because I was so different. I was always functioning on a level of I have to figure out what other people are doing and emulate that. And so it took me a long time socially to understand what was really going on as far as feminism and all that is concerned. I'll be honest. I didn't really understand it. I didn't genuinely understand it until I went MGTOW, until I started listening to Barbarossa and Stardust, and then all the other content creators. I didn't really have a reference point. Once I had a reference point, I was able to figure it out completely. I just sort of instinctually, does that make sense? I kind of instinctually handled this stuff. And when somebody would say something that sounded crazy, I would tell them it sounded crazy. But as far as my value system was concerned, it was mostly shaped by my environment, which, since I lived in cities for the most part, was pretty liberal. Nowadays, I'm a libertarian, and it's not just because I'm older. It's because I finally, figured shit out. But I always had one foot in that door anyway. I was just trying to fit in. And so I would adopt, the views of the people around me so I could have a social group to associate with. So that's been my life for most of my life is that dichotomy. And it wasn't until I totally isolated that I really was able to figure things out to the extent that we're talking about it now.
You're able to clear your head.
Yeah.
All right, so I dropped a link to StreamYard. If you guys want to come on and ask a question, I'm only going to let you guys come on one at a time. But if you want to have questions, comments, feel free to come on in, get your stuff set up, and you can ask Apoc or even myself a question. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you can ask in the chat. So, feel free, guys. They're a little behind, so we'll give them a second to
Well, that's okay.
see if they want to
I
get there.
Yeah, I feel like we've been talking about very general things. So if people want to ask me about specifics, like, that would be great.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, that would be good.
I don't feel like we've burrowed down into anything too deeply during this conversation. Just kind of.
Yeah. We'll probably have you on again, and
Yeah, I'm game. I mean, there's so many things we could discuss. Yeah.
we just had so much to cover as
Yeah.
first appearance, and we're just trying to get some background on you. So we do have a question. What are your thoughts on future gender relations?
That's an enormous question.
Hey guys, quick before you answer. Also, be sure if you're asking APOC, me, or both of us when you put the question in parentheses. So try to be like question 4. But I'm going to let APOC answer this one.
I think. Well, I'm going to answer the next question that I'm noticing. Is that okay first? Because it's an easy one to answer.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm cool with DFM. I don't. It's everything's fine. We just have disagreements. Like he's cool with being disagreed with. I just wasn't feeling like I was contributing anymore, and I also had so many other things going on in my life that I just felt like I had to fade back. So ultimately, my philosophical position changed enough so that I didn't think I was contributing to his server properly. Does that make sense? And I didn't back away because I was upset. I backed away because I didn't want to upset. I didn't want to cause any difficulty for him. I wanted to, keep everything harmonious because I respect him. I've known him for a while. I don't talk to him much these days. I don't talk to any of these guys too much these days. But I don't have any problem with TFM at all as a person. So I hope that answers your question. And we did mention earlier that maybe you weren't here, that the door is open for me to go back and moderate if I wanted to. I still don't think I have the ability to do that at the moment. Okay, so what are my thoughts on future? What are our thoughts, let's say, on future gender relations? My God. I mean, this touches on what you said we shouldn't talk about.
Well, how about the short version?
I think. Thank you, by the way.
I was going to say Cliff Notes. But.
Thank you to MGTOW UI. Appreciate that. Well, okay, the Cliff Notes version goes like this. Monogamous marriage and the nuclear family is a trade. This is my viewpoint, and it's a viewpoint that's being affirmed by evolutionary biology and paleontology more and more as the years go by. The nuclear family and monogamous relationships between men and women is a trade. It's a trade-off. We are not naturally monogamous creatures. If we were, we wouldn't be attracted to other people after we mated with someone. That is not the case. Men and women are both capable of and want to be, or I should say the desire exists for us to be promiscuous. And most human beings, not all, but most human beings put in a situation where they could have guilt and risk-free sex with an attractive partner would probably do it. So that monogamy, natural monogamy doesn't exist in the human species. It's social monogamy. And that's why we have to have laws and marriage and all the things. Because otherwise it would just naturally happen, like in nature. Now it's been asserted that, well, what would men do in nature? They would take a woman or many women, and that would be their property, and they would defend them against all comers and so on. Okay. And that's what is normally referred to as a hard patriarchy. That does happen sometimes. But the evidence of the evolutionary biological evidence and paleontological evidence clearly shows, and there are current societies that exist that don't function under those rubrics and yet are functioning. The biggest one being the Mosuo in northwestern China. It's about 250,000 people, and they're not monogamous. So we're just not evolution. That's not how we came up as a species. The way we came up as a species, what it looks like, is a small band, like 100, 150 people. Everyone is having sexual relations with everyone else. Everyone has access to sex. Not at the drop of a hat, but pretty much everyone, men and women, have access to sex. And it's used as a social tool by the women to keep the men loyal to the tribe, and so on and so forth. So this is the evolutionary ground I'm talking about, and is probably one of the reasons that a lot of the things have happened in terms of feminism and other things as resources have become more plentiful. And the absolute survival need of women to be in monogamous relationships has faded. So what we're seeing is nature reasserting itself, I think. Now you ask me, what is the future of gender relations? I don't know. I think that so many people have been inculcated with the philosophy of the nuclear family and monogamous relationships that for that to change into something that actually works would be pretty miraculous, because that's a structure that nobody planned. That's a structure that basically worked to build civilization. It worked to build civilization. It worked to build modern society. So I don't know what the future of gender relations is. In a broad sense. In a more narrow sense, I'm noticing that more and more women are starting to realize that the idea that they can wait until they're older to have a marriage and a child is a fantasy. And I think that younger women are waking up to this as well. And so I'm not sure what effect that's going to have on the mating game exactly. But I think that gender relations are going to remain in chaos until a new stable structure is formed. That's what I think. I don't know what that structure is going to be. We could go back to strict monogamy. I have no idea. And I don't think there's any predicting it, because we're sitting here at the apex of a technological revolution that has enabled human beings to do what we're doing right now, which is communicate with each other via magic, essentially.
Yes.
So with this level of interconnectivity, I have no idea. I don't think anyone has any way of knowing where this is going to go. I do have faith, though, that I do have some faith and I guess hope that the human species will figure it out. And the new structure, whatever it is, will become stable.
Yeah, I'm of a similar opinion. I don't know where it's going. I mean, the average dude now knows what a simp is. Like Apoc said, women are starting to realize, wait a minute, I can't have kids at 40.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to wait and see where it goes.
Yeah. I mean the the whole business. I mean, I, artificial wombs are something that we.
On, plumber.
Hey, man, what's up?
Hey, I just joined in because you hit on something that I never really thought about. You and I have had that same discussion about it's not human nature to pair bond for life, and you said something that I can agree with a caveat, and maybe we can explore that a little bit.
Sounds good.
What do you think? I agree that, like you said, we'd basically be penguins if we mated and pair bonded for life. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
That we see something attractive, we want to get with it. What do you think about pair bonding from the respect of familiarity, of building a family? And what I'm getting by that is you may still be attracted to other people of the opposite sex, but once you build a relationship with a person,
right,
isn't there that familiarity of that relationship that would want you to carry that on beyond those, let's call it the fertile years of a woman?
Sure. That's yeah. But that's okay. So let's look at the context of what you're talking about. In the context of the current structure, which is nuclear family, meaning one man, one woman, and children. That is perfectly reasonable. That's obviously, and that's been happening for a long time. But if you think about it, what that is it's the tribal reflex, isn't it? It's a sort of. So if you were already
the tribal bond, the family bond, I get it. Yeah.
Right. So if you were already a member of an extended tribe where all of this was taken for granted, that wouldn't have as much, that you'd already have that. You'd already have all that familiarity. You'd have familiarity with everyone. And so that bond would be there with your tribe. So yeah, it's an extension of the tribal bond. And that's why I say this is a trade we made. We fragmented ourselves in order to get more productivity and innovation. That's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, you and I, we've kind of disagreed on, had some tension on this particular conversation, but today, you brought a question together to me that kind of clarified it in my mind. I'm like, because me personally, once I committed to a marriage relationship, yeah, I still found other women attractive, and they still found me attractive, but I lost all all desire to pursue those potential new relationships for what I had.
They were out tribe.
The what?
They were out tribe.
Oh, gotcha.
And you were in tribe, and you had a tribal relationship. It's like, yeah, absolutely. And this is what I mean by I think we need to dig a lot deeper to understand what's going on.
Right, and we're definitely going to do another stream about that. So I don't want to dig too much. Because,
yeah, we're gonna talk about it extensively.
I got here late. I fell asleep. Didn't realize you were even streaming.
So you're welcome to stay. Since you're OG, you're welcome to stay on the panel, and
I'll hang out
if you want to hang out. Okay, cool. So we're going to do a round table on this next question by MGTOW. Try to stick with your Cliff Notes answer if you don't mind. But we will start with Apoc and then go to Plumber, and then I'll put in my 2 cents real quick. So the question is on the screen: do you believe that the apocalypse men are going to sacrifice themselves during an economic collapse?
Well, I would say yes and no. I would say it depends on the individual. So some proportion will and some proportion won't. And I think, I know that's a wishy-washy answer, but I honestly don't think there's another one for that question, because we don't really have we don't have a lot of data on what quote unquote might happen. I think that, but all that being said, my sense of it is, and this is just my opinion, that more traditional relationships will tend to reassert themselves during such a time, because of, for obvious reasons, because of the fact that resources are lacking. So when resources are lacking, what happens? So that's my sense of it, but I don't know for sure.
Well, you asked the question, when resources collapse, the weaker will always gravitate towards the stronger.
Yeah.
And the natural order will be reclaimed.
Sure. But to what extent that happens,
right,
because of the fact that we have this technology and all the things in place that we have, this is essentially free. That's not free, but it's pretty cheap for us to do this. And, most people will remain connected even during such a time. So again, we have to be careful about historicity and what that natural order will look like,
right,
in a post-technology world.
Well, we don't, frankly, none of us know what's going to happen, simply because the rules have changed. Traditionally, women did not have the ability to use their wiles or sexuality to earn money. And today, that's a complete game changer until they age out.
Yeah. And even then,
there's fetish dudes that, granny porn is a thing.
Yeah.
Rule 34, and if it exists, there's porn of it. I'll throw in my 2 cents on that. So basically, I don't know if it's going to be really a concern. I don't know how old you are, MGTOW UI, but the powers that be are going to try to keep. It's inevitable if we keep doing what we're doing as far as fiat currency and all that stuff. Everything happening in the world, and you got the addition of cryptocurrency now too. They're going to stretch this out for a long time. I might, even at my age, I'm not that old, but I'm, 40's not too far off.
What a pup.
I don't know if I'll even live through the economic collapse that everybody's talking about. So, I don't know.
Oh, right now I'm just hoping I'm still around for when we get to Mars.
Isn't that exciting? I got really hyped from launch yesterday. That was cool.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to address something. Seek R made a comment. Yeah, the present is never like the past. And to be honest, I wouldn't want to go back to 1942. End of story.
Yeah.
I have more understanding, freedom, information, and liberty now than anyone did in 1942. I may not have as many economic opportunities as they did, perhaps, based on the war and the post-war era, but as far as my ability to do what I want to do in the world, it's unimpinged as opposed to then. So yeah, I wouldn't want to go back to that.
I think you're right in some respects. I think there's a give and take there.
Sure.
Of course, neither one of us saw that time. We're only speculating from what our forefathers have told us.
Correct.
Let's step back to when the Constitution was written and ratified.
Mm-hmm.
And you are more libertarian now, you said.
Very, very much so, yeah.
Yeah, and as am I. I think we have more opportunities to do as we wish. However, I think we have slipped more culturally. We're slipping more collectivist all the time. And
Right.
Collectivism is by nature the feminine imperative.
Okay.
And I personally would like to see us keep the masculine form of liberty in our culture and gain these freedoms that you speak of that we all enjoy. Because I think that would be more liberty.
Well, I can't really find anything to disagree with about that. I would just add the thing about now is that we truly do live in interesting times. We are living through an island of instability.
Mm-hmm.
And in the mathematical sense, like in the chaos sense, this right now there's a lot of uncertainty because of the effects of the modern world on culture and on people. And what you're seeing, what I think I'm seeing, and please jump in if you think I'm full of it, is a sort of we're seeing the dying gasps of the old ways of doing things, and the way that's manifesting is through this chaos, through this through the inequities that we've discussed, through all of the various things that are occurring in a panoply of ways around the world, to cause this conflict because of the fact that we now are developing a new way of being. And I know that all sounds very, very vague, but I think it's true.
Well, we can just compare what you're talking about, I think, to the current dynamics of how the political parties have basically changed hats. Back in the 1960s, the Democrat Party was for liberty and freedom and free speech. And in the last 50, 60 years, it has morphed to 180 degrees. The Democrat Party is more about control and division, dividing party lines. And it's the conservative party that's talking more about free speech and liberty.
Right.
Do you follow what I'm getting at?
That's because the and I yes, absolutely. I think the reason that's, I mean, historians will of course, have a much more detailed analysis of this, but I think, based on my limited knowledge, that starting in the 50s through the 80s, we had a very conservative swing in this country. And in many ways. Now, feminism obviously was getting going during that time and doing all of its work, but the social strata was still very similar. Like it wasn't the 50s and the 80s, but we had Reagan in the 80s. We had a very strong, I don't know if you guys remember the moral majority.
The remnants.
Yeah.
Things were changing, but our mindset was still a remnant. I don't know the word.
People look, the what I'm saying is the conservatives went too far.
Yeah.
And because they went too far, the pushback was from the left. Now the left is going too far and the pushback is from the right. And this is the pendulum everybody's talks about. But at this point, I don't think we can make a lot of predictions simply and because of the fact that this technology that we're dealing with is so ubiquitous and so available and is possible for us to have this conversation. I know that big tech is trying to suppress lots of things, but ultimately I would be surprised if that succeeded long term, because
freedom always wins out.
Well, ultimately,
whatever freedom is, and hopefully because we now have technology that never forgets.
Correct.
We will never, or if we do repeat, history is doomed to repeat itself, right?
Yeah. Hopefully
the cycle of forgetting is a whole lot shorter because of technology.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in some ways attention spans have gotten worse.
Yeah.
But the fact that nothing is ever forgotten is a double-edged sword. But it's a good thing in this context where you can always hold someone's feet to the fire about something they said 10 years ago, and say, well, no, you didn't. Like, you said that you never were for this, but here you are saying you're for it.
You just said something that really kind of sparked a thought here. Attention spans are getting short, but there's a new phenomenon happening, particularly on YouTube, which is long form discussion.
That's true. And on iTunes.
Right. That is totally flabbergasting me. And maybe it's the 80-20 rule. Maybe 80% of the population are still stuck in this 3 to 7 minute sound bite. I think television programming got us into that 7-minute attention span, and then you go to a 3-minute commercial break. Mm-hmm. But I think as people are gravitating away from mainstream communications, television, and more to YouTube, I think the long form discussion is gaining some real traction.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very good positive thing, because you can't explain complicated subjects in 7 minutes. I'm sorry.
No, you cannot. You cannot. Well, I mean, look at Joe Rogan.
Right.
All you have to do is say Joe Rogan, and that it's a successful medium. And then there's some, his associates like Jocko Willink and, people like that who have successful podcasts, and it spreads out from there. Jordan Peterson. I don't know about you, but I do watch his lectures, which I think are interesting. So yeah, it's that's what I'm trying to. This is my. So I'll answer this. I see what you put on the screen here.
Yeah.
And I will absolutely address that in a second. What I'm trying to get to is we do. So you know what? I'll address it right now. Hey, Sikar. How do I really know? I don't, but I don't think anyone else does either. And the reason, and I agree with you, the official narrative of history is a lot of bullshit. That's why I've gone through the effort of digging into primary sources about events that I didn't think I knew enough about. For example, during the Jim Crow era, like, one of the things that seems to have been forgotten is that Democrats were the ones who fought it tooth and nail against civil rights for blacks for generations, from Woodrow Wilson on through. And then they quote unquote flipped, but they never really flipped. I mean, we know that's not true. So you're right. The official narrative of history is a lot of bullshit, but I've put some effort into, and everyone should put some effort into finding out what the real story was. Why do I think that what is happening is new under the sun? For the same reason that the internal combustion engine and its effect on the world was so profound. If you look at the effect of that invention, the steam turbine, the internal combustion engine, nuclear power, all these things, you just go back to the machine lathe. To, you can go back to the 1700s and see what happened when the lathe was invented. I think it was the 1700s. I could be wrong, but it was around that late 16, early 1700s that happened, and that transformed the world in profound ways. And that was just one invention. This is something that is not just transforming the physical world around us. This thing has completely transformed how we communicate with each other, period. I can talk, it's never ever been true that I can call somebody in Australia and talk to them live for next to no money.
And no lag.
And no lag. You have to wrap your head around the fact that this is brand spanking new. The capabilities, and I say that as someone who lived through the transformation and was part of building it, because I've been working in technology and telecommunications for a long time, for 25 years. So I know how profound it is because I was there doing it, and it changed my life when I got onto it in the early days, in the late 80s. Totally changed my life because my social circles changed, everything changed. The effect of this now, where anybody can just pick up a little device in their pocket and talk to anyone in the world for nearly free or free, it's unbelievable. That's never been true before. So that's why I say it's unprecedented. And that's not even to talk about all the other things, media format, video recording, video exposition, long format discussions, all these things.
It's connected us to the world, but the effects of the time, because let's face it, time is the only resource that we can't recover.
True.
It has reduced our time in contact on the individual in real life. Do you see where I'm going at with this? Yeah. How do we balance that? I think there's there's a tremendous amount of time that the younger generations spend behind a screen, and they're watching life pass before them, and they're not living it.
That's true. But I think I don't know if that's just an adjustment period or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, could be.
Because there are people who have been, for a while now, who have been talking about unplugging and going out and doing things. And there are people who do, like Dave Rubin, famously, he unplugs for 30 days once a year. I think in August, I think.
That may be a technology deficiency right now, because everything over time gets smaller and more compact and more mobile. Right now, yes, we have cell phones. We have these, but you still have to hold them in front of you. You still have to, you can be connected to the world, but you also have to be the cameraman while you're connected to the world. I feel that a technology will come forward that will, I don't know, let's call them, you'll put a pair of sunglasses on or something that'll have two-way cameras on it. One will be pointing at you and the other will be pointing at what you're looking at. And we can go out into the world then and be truly connected and truly share what we're doing. I don't think the technology is there right now. And this is just a thought I just had.
Yeah.
We have to kind of wait and see.
Well, just having the phone in our pocket and having that kind of connectivity is powerful enough.
Right.
Seeker, are you a Graham Hancock fan?
He was asked by Sonny if he's one of those ancient alien guys, and he
Right.
admitted that he was.
No, I know. I'm just wondering if it's Graham Hancock or Eric von Daniken.
Well, could be lots of people. The guy
anyway,
that radio show that's always talking about aliens.
Like Red Ice,
Midnight or whatever.
Red Ice Radio.
Not Red Ice. It's.
It used to be the Art Bell show.
Coast to Coast AM, Art Bell,
Coast to Coast, yeah.
Host, and now it's George Norrie. Okay, yeah, they always talk about that shit. You got the guy with the crazy hair who's always in the memes, like
yeah,
aliens.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
Back in the day, it was Father Malachi. If you remember, he was always interviewing him.
Malachi Martin. Yes, I remember.
Malachi Martin, yeah.
If you have a religious bent, those interviews. But I want to get into that. I mean, I've heard people who are, believers in the Bible talk about this very same concept that humans may have had tech and we lost it.
Well, there. I mean, this is a whole different sidetrack, but there actually is evidence that there was an enormous cataclysm that happened about 12,600 years ago, and or 12,900 years ago, I think, the beginning of the Younger Dryas period. There's evidence that a celestial object impacted the Earth and caused a 200-foot sea rise, possibly within a week or two, which coincides with Graham Hancock's work on marine archaeology, where he's finding structures underwater that, for all intents and purposes, really do look like human-made structures. They look like things like temples and buildings. They really do. And there's so I don't want to get into it too much, but it's possible that we had some kind of civilization pre-Younger Dryas that was occupying most of the lowland territory that is now under 400 foot of water, and it was inundated, destroyed. This could be the origin of the legend of Atlantis and that sort of thing. So there actually is evidence for this, which is intriguing. I didn't believe this until I started seeing the real evidence. But what it was, we have no idea. And as far as technology is concerned, who the hell knows? We could go off into the weeds on this for hours.
Yeah. Well, we know there was technology we don't have now. Just look at how the pyramids were built. So, will we ever figure it out? I don't know.
We don't know.
And what
there's
reason for them?
The pyramids didn't convince me as much as the stones they found that weren't actually released from the quarries, that were basically giant obelisks that were like,
right,
hundreds of tons. And when you actually dug the sand out, so this is what I mean. We're going to get sidetracked.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So basically, I don't know, and the evidence is intriguing. And we can't explain it. It's been tried to be. There are a lot of people trying to explain it. We can't explain it. Hopefully, we will someday. But in some sense, it's not relevant whether or not we had this kind of technology pre-Younger Dryas or not, because we're dealing with current human history. So, in current human history, starting at about 6,000 BC and onward, this has never existed. And that's why I say it's unprecedented. We have no context for it. So we don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, guys, we're running low on time.
Do I feel self-actualization? Any thoughts on the subject?
Yeah.
Well, I've been a Buddhist since I was about 24. And I would say that I do feel like I know something, and I do feel like I've been able to successfully alleviate some of my suffering. As far as self-actualization is concerned, the more I strive, the more I realize that it's an ideal. There's no magic at the end of the rainbow. What there is there's better and better results as you go through time. And as Jordan Peterson says, we don't know the limits of that. If you're able to scaffold yourself up on your previous successes and continually do that, we have no idea how far that can go. In my case, because of the fact that I am on the autism spectrum, I've been dealt a few very powerful setbacks in my life because I didn't see something coming. So I don't know where I would be if I had made different choices. Maybe I'd be more self-actualized, maybe I wouldn't. But I can say that I'm more at peace with myself now than I ever have been.
How do you? The question to me is a little disconnected. The terms feel self-actualization. Self-actualization. I don't know that it's something that you can feel. I think it's something you do.
Yeah, it's something you do. Well, it's the kind of thing when you look over your shoulder and you realize you're on top of a hill. It's like you don't actually know. You didn't know until you got there. You didn't even know where the top of the hill was until you hit it. That's happened to me a few times.
But you also realize that there's just another hill in front of you.
There are an infinite number of hills. Yes. Yeah. Because you can't, because the universe is an infinite place, so you can never, but you can definitely reach some level.
You can reach a plateau.
Yeah. You can reach some level of contentment. And you can reach some level of shall we say, of adjustment, so that you're not, constantly floundering. And I think that's, I'm not the best person to ask about this because I'm a serious weirdo, but
aren't we all?
Well, I mean, I was.
That's why we get along. We're all weirdos.
Yeah. I was. Yeah. I mean, for whatever reason, I have a pretty high IQ, and unfortunately, the higher your IQ, the more prone you are to mental illness.
Yep.
Specifically, depression and that sort of thing.
You can almost think yourself crazy.
Thank you. Yes, that is precisely correct. People ask me, I'm pretty thin. How do you stay so thin? I think a lot. They don't believe me. It's like you don't understand what I mean by a lot.
Right. Yeah, you're like me. I've got a half a dozen programs running in the back of my head all the time. Kind of like having too many tabs open on your browser. I always, to use the Star Trek analogy, the Next Generation, the character Barclay, when he connected himself to the computer, and he literally thought himself crazy by being connected to the computer. If anybody's familiar with that particular episode.
Yeah, the one where he, the Zythonians, where they sent the probe and reprogrammed his brain to. Yeah, I remember. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like it's both an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is that I can't, not as well now because I'm older, but I can analyze things in far more detail than most people. And
which disconnects you from the herd, the norm. You become an oddball. You don't connect.
Yeah.
Which leads right back to intersexual dynamics. You are now, if you're of a higher IQ level, you don't relate with the nature of emotion that females tend to reside in.
Well, that's true. But I will also say that it was a woman who was actually an MIT PhD woman,
Outliers everywhere.
outliers everywhere, who said the most apropos thing about it. We were talking. I was in a social setting with a number of MIT people and Harvard people, technical people, and we're discussing something fairly complex. And someone asked me, we all decided to put, I shouldn't say we all decided, but somehow the discussion of what's your IQ got put on the table, and people just started saying what they thought their IQ was, and how they've been tested, and so on. And I said what mine was. I mean, I didn't want to, but I did anyway. And immediately the woman turned her head and looked at me and said, "Oh my God, that must be so lonely." And
Yeah,
that was the most appropriate thing, because I have no way even with other people in the same sky, it's difficult to relate, because we'll have different linguistic patterns, different points of view, and it will take pulling teeth for us to concord.
Well,
to
studies have shown that if you and whoever you're trying to communicate with are more than 2 standard deviations, which is roughly 15 IQ points apart, you are basically speaking a different language. You can't communicate other than like if you were a foreigner in a different country that can barely speak the language.
Yeah, well, I mean, welcome to my life.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I've always gravitated towards very intelligent women, because at least there I have a chance at communication. But yeah, my entire experience has been limiting the way I communicate, and putting everything through 2 and 3 filters so that I don't end up sounding like a computer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you wind up having to, in order to communicate with, let's just face it, the average IQ of America is 100.
Yeah.
That means half the population are dumber than that, lower IQ than that. I don't like to use the word dumber. They're just less intelligent.
Yeah.
So you can't take a lower intelligent person and have them think harder or better while you're communicating with them. You, in order to communicate with them, have to be able to lower to their level. Mm-hmm. And extremely high IQ people, that's a big struggle. That's a big struggle to, I always say, dumb it down, because we find it boring, don't we?
Well, it's not so much boring for me. It's frustrating, because I have to find. Because what I found over time is that the problem isn't so much I can't explain things. The problem is most people don't have. If it's something that's fairly complicated, most people don't have the context to even interpret what I'm saying. So,
or the interest to learn.
But even if they do have the interest, if I'm, even if I set up the context, it rarely works. And it's not like what I'm not saying is that I have any like real superiority, because like I said, it's a trait, man, because
it's not a superiority. It's just different.
It's neuroatypical. And there's a huge trade for that. So, the sacrifice I've made is in my inability to easily relate to most people. And what I've done to hack around that is meditate, study Buddhism, and learn deeply the try to learn deeply the ways of normal communication. And I still to this day don't always succeed. I mean,
you do it through meditation. I have to think of communicating. I have to think of it like, okay, how would I communicate with a child? I'm obviously dealing with someone who's not at my intellectual level. So how can I explain it as I would try to explain it to a child? And I'm not, God, it sounds like we're two Mensa idiots bragging.
Well, no,
and that's not what we're doing.
No, look, there's a phrase in physics called "lies we tell children," and it's to genuinely describe what a Bell's apparatus is would be impossible to someone who doesn't have a background in physics or mathematics. So you use analogies that are lies that give a sense of what it is, but it's not really what it is. And it's just
Did he fall off?
Yeah, I'm not sure. He's still in here. I just don't hear him talking anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe his microphone, maybe he was using like a headset that ran out of power or something. We'll give him just a moment. I will. I don't have the ability to run a stream for like 5 to 8 hours, like some black pill people. So, it's not that what he was saying.
Dude, we couldn't talk about the same shit for 5 to 8 hours.
He lost his connection.
Yeah.
He might come back in. So, Plumber, you got any final thoughts? What's going on with you, man? You gonna make any content? And I know you're out there, a little game.
There's so many ideas. I don't want to say the same thing other people say. So I only create content when I think I'm saying something new or cutting edge that nobody else is. And this is completely off topic of what your channel does, but I've gotten into, God, I hate even doing this. The whole George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. Well, the whole riots.
Officer, so I'm sure you have a lot to say about all this.
Yeah, I didn't want to get involved with it, but there's some shit that you just can't not see, and I see the perspectives of the anti-cop rhetoric on the internet, and there's so many things that I don't think the majority of the public understand. And that is
armchair experts.
Do what?
They're armchair experts. I mean, you're
a
police officer. I've been trained to do a lot of the same type of things, including detain people, active shooter.
Well, I don't think they understand how police are trained, and what's the technical term is the use of force continuum.
Right. We just call it use of force, but but putting your body weight on your with your knee on a motherfucker's neck is not procedure.
No, it actually is.
Is it? I was never taught to do that.
Yeah. Body weight. If they're actively resisting, tensing their muscles and not complying, you apply pressure. You apply pressure until they submit. Now, you have to be careful with that. When you relax, they may just be relaxing and regrouping for another attack. Yeah, the guy had handcuffs on him. Let me tell you, you can still get your ass kicked with a guy that's still got handcuffs on. Okay. I actually had to mace a guy after I had handcuffs on him and he was in my car because he was kicking the shit out of me. So there are times. Now, I'm not, the video is really hard to discern. Okay. Did he have his body weight on Floyd, or did he just have his knee in position to add body weight if there was further resistance? See, that we don't know. And I would challenge anyone looking at those videos to try to articulate that. You can't do it.
Well, what I'll say, Plumber, is I wouldn't do it. I would not put my knee and my body weight on a man's neck who was handcuffed. Just wouldn't do it for just the liability.
Well, I've had to.
It doesn't seem right to me.
I've had to, and it's, that's one of my big things. If you've never done the job, how the hell can you have an opinion on what whether you should or shouldn't have?
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of armchair experts who think, oh, I could do this and do that, and they've never done it before.
Well, let's face it, the optics look horrible.
Yeah,
the optics look terrible, and like I commented on Big John's Prepared channel, he was going off on they should have arrested him with blah blah blah, and I'm like, you've never done the job. Cops are put in an impossible. They have an impossible job. They're expected to be perfect, and they have to decide in milliseconds what experts or people can analyze for days, weeks, years to determine whether they were right or wrong. If they expect perfection out of police officers, then I guess Jesus Christ ought to come down from on high and become a police officer, because there's only been one that's been perfect, and that's him. So
I'm back, by the way. Sorry about that, guys.
Oh, welcome back. Glad to
I lost. I lost. Wasn't watching my battery meter, so.
All right, so we're gonna.
Didn't mean to sidetrack everything. It just
2.5 hours. I meant to stop it, try to shut things down at 2 hours, but you guys were. I didn't want to interrupt. Like it was good, so I didn't want to mess that up. Real quick, let's address what Sonny here, the Nuclear Wolf, has to say. Do you think it will translate into legislature? Trump doesn't make legislatures, but
no,
I don't.
The Patriot Act already gives the the president the authority to declare an individual or a group a domestic terrorist or a domestic terror organization. So
I thought it was the DOJ, but you may be.
It might be the DOJ. I thought it was just the president, though. Either way, the Patriot Act gives them the power to do that. So they already have the power. It doesn't need to go to legislature. They can already do that. So if it gets formally declared as a domestic terrorist organization, then I don't know if that'll happen. But
well, there's that difference in definitions again. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
Yeah,
and we have a great divide.
I think the difference, though, is in between people who are helping and people who are hurting society.
Bingo. And as long as we have the ability to have free speech, and we use that ability for speech for weapons with words rather than weapons of destruction or injury.
Yeah.
I think we will eventually hammer out our differences and get closer to harmony.
Yeah, probably. I hope so. That's the hope.
Right.
And I am seeing signs of that.
Finally.
Yeah, we'll see. But this political talk is very dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and peel out. Wolf, thanks for inviting me on. Apoc, it's good to hear from you, and take care of yourself,
You
brother.
too, man.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. You too.
All right. See ya.
See ya.
Yeah, I got cut off in the middle of saying I just wanted to put a cap on what I was saying earlier, which is being very intelligent is a double-edged sword like any other gift. It's not just that it causes me difficulty with depression and anxiety, but it also causes me difficulty relating to other people, and it's been because I didn't get any kind of unconditional support. It's been it's just been really difficult. So people have said, "Oh, I wish I was as smart as you," and I say, "No, you don't," because it is. In some ways, it's a genuine curse because it's like it's like what Roy said at the end of Blade Runner. If you could see what I've seen, and believe me, it's overwhelming. And when I've described it the best I can, which wouldn't be easy to do here right now, but I've described it to people who are genuinely interested, and they can't imagine. They can't even put themselves in my shoes. So it's non-trivial, and that's why I think it also has no particular bearing on my ability to be a moral person. By the way, I could be an evil genius, too. So, which goes back to what we were saying very early in this conversation, which is I would much rather have a person of slightly above average intelligence who was good and kind and expansive about their practices in charge than someone who was super high, very highly intelligent.
Yeah,
because
some criminals are highly intelligent. They just
right.
do a different type of crime than their typical murder or robbery or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and most of the really smart criminals never get caught. And I know that from hearing stories about organized crime. So, I've posed it to people. Well, what do you think would happen if I decided to be evil? And people are like, no. It's just bad. That would be bad. And it's like, because I know I do really bad things, but I don't do them because I'm not an asshole. But that's not because I'm smart. That's because I was raised by parents who were determined to not be an asshole. And I don't know if that puts a bow on things a little bit, but as far as the whole self-actualization that is concerned, I would say it's harder for a very smart person to become self-actualized than a person who is only above average intelligence. Because when you can see everything that's possible, it makes it difficult to decide what has more value. So you end up in analysis paralysis all the time. If I didn't just essentially make coin flip decisions sometimes, it would be difficult for me to get through my day. So I hope that answers anyone's questions about that. And I would love to have another conversation with you about whatever you want. You're an awesome host. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I just have people on who are good at talking, and I'm a good listener, and it works out that way somehow.
Yeah, you're a good host. You're a very good host. Thank you.
So yeah, I was going to ask you if you wanted to do. Some people in the audience really like these types of streams. Let's try to not make it 2.5 hours, but I definitely want to have you back on.
Sure.
And if any of you guys that end up watching this want to have him on, try to find him on Discord at the same name, Apocrypha.
Yeah, and if I don't
get a hold of me, and I'll contact him for you or hook you guys up. However it's done, he's a great guy to interview. He knows a lot of things about a lot of things, and he can talk.
I can talk. Yeah, I can talk your ear off, man.
That.
I like doing this because I learn every time I do it. And the act of putting voice to thoughts is and also listening to what other people say and the questions that are being asked is really helpful.
We had good questions tonight.
Yeah, they were good. They were good, and I appreciate it very much. So yeah, if anybody wants to just chit chat with me about whatever, I have a background in physics and mathematics. I'm a technology guy, I'm Buddhist. I'm a weirdo. So I guarantee you my answer to your questions probably aren't going to be what you expect.
I do recommend you guys check out his interview with Stardust on YouTube.
Yeah, I felt that was a little rambly, but
it was good.
It was good.
A lot of two really smart guys talking about all kinds of different subjects. I mean, if you're into these types of streams, these brainy streams, that's definitely one you got to check out. So
yeah, he's a good guy.
And speaking of streams, and I'm thinking about doing one. Me and Grizzly. Now that might be interesting. Called Caffeine and Hatred. So maybe a morning show where obviously I'm the laid back guy and Grizzly's Grizzly.
Oh boy,
talking about current events or something. It's something we're considering.
It's an old but good formula.
It is a great formula. Mm-hmm. Two guys drinking coffee and one guy just letting loose. I've always wanted to do a stream with Sonny too. I thought about having Sonny as a co-host a couple of times, but he's maybe too hot for YouTube. But I'm gonna probably make a Discord, guys. I have a Discord, but it's more for my non-red pill stuff. So I'm going to make a Discord for red pill so that we can all get in there and have discussions and stuff like that. Just one centralized place. So look for an invite in the coming weeks to an open invite for Discord. Yeah, Sonny says, no, you don't want me to be co-host.
Not a good idea. Yeah,
too hot for YouTube.
Sony, that is more self-aware than I've seen you in a long time. That is refreshing.
He knows, but I think he's hilarious, man. But he would trigger people. Mm-hmm. So, what about you, man? You got any closing thoughts, ideas, comments?
Well, this is about interview with a former MGTOW, and my basic driving complaint about, well, I shouldn't say complaint, my criticism of this of both spheres, the red pill sphere and the MGTOW sphere, is that people aren't. It seems as if people have fossilized into camps, and no one's digging anymore. No one's going after hard subjects, and so the discussion isn't continuing. It's just being rehashed over and over again in different contexts. The discussion that happened like 5 years ago is still going on, and it's not progressing. And that's what I find I was going to say problematic. How about that? I'll put on my glasses.
Good.
That's what I find difficult, because we are finite creatures. We don't know anything. We're basically just, a bunch of meatbag chimps running around thinking we know things. And if we can just keep throwing things against the wall that are uncomfortable, that's really what it's about, right? It's about looking into the places where you don't want to look and really digging in and finding out what's there. And that's what I feel like hasn't been happening for some time now. The conclusions have been reached. Here's the analysis. That's it. So, on the one side you have people talking game, on the other side you have people talking aversion, and I'm not. That's why
I don't know if you've seen below Tomasi's streams, but it's more probably your speed. He talks about the concepts, not just game or anything.
Yeah. No, I have. I just think I have watched his stuff. And he's a smart guy. I just his level of analysis is I think I would like to have more deep philosophical conversations about the nature of various aspects of human nature.
Well, I'd like to have you on his show or something. I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I would love to be on his show. I mean, he's
have a great combo. It'd be very telling.
Yeah, it'd be. I think it would be interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to dig harder, because I got to a point where I thought I understood, and then I started realizing I didn't. And when I started poking at those particular areas, people started resisting, and that to me indicates that people have plateaued and they're not willing to move on. Because that's my entire life has been me doing that to myself, and it's the only way I've ever progressed. So, maybe I'm projecting, but I think that's the way most people progress, is by looking at those things which are uncomfortable and trying to do something about them, trying to understand them better, and maybe finding some kind of cause that can be acted on. So. Yeah,
it gives me something to ask about some other time.
No worries.
I had a thought. We're trying to end it, and I don't want to ask, because I know how that goes.
No worries. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and thanks for being here, and thank you, Sonny, Broccoli, Seek, and all the other guys who showed up.
Thanks to everyone who asked questions. Yeah, Shogun. Shogun outed me. Yeah. Shogun outed me, the bastard.
He's gonna, when he gets rich, he's gonna buy you a new truck, man. Remember that.
I seriously appreciate that. If he actually does that, I will.
He's a good man.
Literally give him a bow, and if he's amenable, I'll give him a hug too.
All right, guys. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, guest Apoc. It's been a great conversation, a lot longer than I intended, but a great conversation nonetheless. And,
it's been great, yeah. Thank you, my friend.
Catch you all later. Catch you next time.